Belief is something I find is often misunderstood. Taken to the extreme, it can blind us from the truth. It can enslave us to the will of those who would wish to control us. It can excuse us from responsibility and can even be used to justify atrocities that we would otherwise not commit. But what does it actually mean to believe? Is belief healthy or is it harmful? And is belief something which any of us can ever be truly free from? When we say that we believe something, we're essentially admitting to the fact that we don't really know. Because if we know something, I mean really know it, then there's no need to believe it. And that's really the difference between knowing and believing. Belief is essentially an assumption, a speculation, a conjecture. And what makes it a belief rather than knowledge is that it isn't certain. And there's nothing inherently wrong with believing if our belief is based upon good reason. It really only becomes dangerous when we confuse our belief for certainty. When it all boils down, can we say that there's anything which we truly know for certain? And when we say that we believe something, can we recognize that our belief is essentially an admission of uncertainty? Generally, when we talk about belief, we're talking about an idea that has been accepted purely on authority. This means that we have accepted something as true without really understanding it. We've accepted it on the faith that the person espousing it has some kind of certainty. And we accept it without necessarily examining it to see if it is true. But if we don't take the time to examine it, then how do we know? How can we ever be certain of anything which we believe? We all have beliefs. I have beliefs. And when I talk about my own belief, I'm not talking about that kind of blind acceptance. I'm talking more about holding a hypothesis based on knowledge, based on observation, logic, and reason. And this means that I've accepted some idea as being probable, but until it's been proven as an absolute fact, I still have to admit a certain amount of uncertainty. I still have to remain open to the possibility that my understanding is limited and that further evidence could prove my belief to be flawed or even false. And so I have to maintain a certain degree of flexibility, especially in the face of new information. And unfortunately, many people don't maintain this kind of flexibility. Most of us don't really understand the nature of belief and often confuse it for certainty. What is more troublesome is when our beliefs are based not upon any kind of evidence, but merely upon hearsay, and especially when there is pressure or coercion to accept them, in spite of the lack of evidence to support them, or in spite of all the evidence against them. There are many different reasons why we adopt belief without any evidence, and the most common reason being social conformity, a need to be accepted and respected by the group, to feel a sense of belonging. And there's simply the matter of consensus. If everyone shares the same belief, we tend to naturally assume that there must be some truth to it. Another reason why we might blindly adopt some particular belief is because it gives us comfort, because it offers a convenient answer to life's deepest mysteries and perplexities. We may not be certain that it's the correct answer, but we feel it's better than having no answer at all. It makes us feel safe and secure, whereas uncertainty can often make us feel quite uncomfortable. And as I've said before, there's nothing inherently wrong with having beliefs as long as we recognize the uncertainty behind them. We all have beliefs. Even atheists have beliefs. The conviction that God does not exist is a belief, since you can't know with absolute certainty that something does not exist. What makes belief problematic or dangerous, however, is when we forget that it's simply a belief and we begin to hold to the conviction that it's an absolute truth. It's problematic in the sense that once we mistake our belief for certainty, we become closed to any and all opposing ideas and evidence. We're unable to grow in our understanding of reality because we believe we already understand it. And it becomes dangerous when we begin to force our beliefs on others in a way that is forceful, invasive, violent, or destructive, or when we use our beliefs to justify violent or apathetic behavior. Something which is quite interesting about belief is the way in which we have a tendency to cling to it, even when the evidence is lacking or is stacked against us. We're often very quick to defend, but rarely do we have the willingness to listen and consider opposing viewpoints. And when we express our beliefs, it's generally for the purpose of persuading others to accept them. Rarely do people sit down to discuss their beliefs with the intention of simply broadening their own perspective. And why are we so fervent in our mission to convert others? We might say that we're trying to help them, trying to save them, which in and of itself seems quite noble, but in most cases, I think we're just trying to quell our own doubts. Doubt and belief are really two sides of the same coin, and that coin is uncertainty. Often when someone is trying very hard to convince another of his beliefs, what he's really doing is trying to convince himself. Deep down, there's some doubt, and as long as there are those who believe differently from us, that doubt remains active. It would be more comforting for us if we could just bury it and forget all about it, but each time someone expresses a belief that is in alignment with that doubt is triggered. And this causes us distress because it forces us to consider the possibility that our beliefs may be flawed or even false. If we could somehow convince everyone around us to accept the same belief as us, it would offer support to that belief. It would give us some sense of confirmation. It would help us to leave our doubt buried and undisturbed. And this is often why doubt is so adamantly discouraged and even scorned, especially in religious institutions. But I think that doubt is a very useful thing. It's a subconscious mechanism which challenges unfounded beliefs. It causes us to question the very nature of our beliefs, to hold them under the light of reason, under the light of scrutiny. If we didn't have this mechanism, we would be prone to believing anything and everything. Rather than ignoring and repressing our doubts, we should invite them to the surface where we can examine them. Our doubts, when allowed to arise, offer us the opportunity to more thoroughly examine our beliefs and bring us closer to truth. We shouldn't be afraid to face our doubts. If something we believe is absolutely true, that belief will stand up to scrutiny. But I think it's because we doubt so strongly in certain areas that we're afraid to examine them more closely, because our doubts bring into question the validity of our beliefs. But this should give us all the more reason to examine them. Some people say that it's childish to believe whatever we're told. I would say that it's naive, but not necessarily childish. Children, if uninhibited, are actually quite inquisitive. If they don't understand something, they will question it. They will ask why 1,000 times over until they're satisfied. And we should have this same kind of childlike mentality. We should seek to understand, not to simply blindly accept. We should have this kind of persistent curiosity that moves us to probe deeply into the issue that's at hand. The only reason children blindly accept anything is because their authority figures discourage their questioning and often use fear and shame to instill beliefs in them. So as these children grow up, they often hold to these beliefs out of fear, but deep down there's usually some doubt, and that doubt is constantly being discouraged. But this doubt, I think, needs to be examined if we truly desire to know the truth. The first place to begin is by simply acknowledging and accepting our uncertainty. And this can be a bit frightening. We tend to be comforted by our beliefs. They make us feel secure, but all security is really false security. And we need to learn to be comfortable with uncertainty, with not always knowing. And only then is there any possibility of truly knowing anything. We should exercise a healthy degree of skepticism concerning all things unknown. And skepticism is one of these things that I think is greatly misunderstood. The word has evolved in our modern times to have a connotation which is much different than the classical definition. People often equate skepticism with a strong sense of disbelief. They think that to be skeptical means to automatically disregard something as false. But this is not at all what skepticism really means. The term originated with a Greek school of philosophers who called themselves skeptics, a word which implies inquiry or reflectiveness. And so a true skeptic is not someone who immediately doubts anything, nor necessarily believes anything in particular. A skeptic is someone who investigates, who examines. To be skeptical means neither to accept nor to reject, but to withhold all conclusions until the matter has been thoroughly examined. So one who is skeptical is willing to examine all sides of any issue without giving way to preconceived ideas. This doesn't mean that such a person is without preconceptions. It simply means that one is willing to suspend their own preconceptions in order to reach a more thorough understanding. A true skeptic is aware of his own uncertainty and is not afraid to be proven wrong, because such a person holds the prospect of truth in higher regard than his own pride. And he knows that truth can only be understood through a direct knowing, by which belief ultimately becomes unnecessary. If truth is what we seek, and not merely to be comforted, then we have to embrace uncertainty. We have to be willing to admit what we don't know. We have to be willing to examine our doubts and to question our beliefs. And we have to be willing to open ourselves up to the innumerable possibilities of a universe which we do not fully understand.